Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental wellness while working in the mental health field. Today, I am joined by Tara McGrath. Tara, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
First podcast. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yes, it's my very first podcast. I'm very excited and a little nervous, but I'm excited to be here.
It's easy. I'm a laid back, chill host. How'd you get into the mental health field is always my starting question.
Oh my goodness.
What got you here?
Yeah, good question. Well, it started, it's funny. I was just saying this the other day. I went into college thinking I was going to be a science major and then found out that was way too hard. So I found psychology interesting, and so got a degree in psychology. But kind of fooled around for a bit after undergrad, and eventually just figured out that I didn't. You know how it is. You can't do a whole lot and make a good living with an undergraduate psychology degree.
Right.
And I got this weird job. I was working for a little bit in travel insurance.
Sure.
Random. And that was making okay money, but I was completely unfulfilled. And so I eventually decided I needed to go back to school and do more meaningful work and wanted to become a therapist. So ended up in an MFT program, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So,
was the MFT program on purpose? Like couples, family? What was it about it that appealed to you?
I think what had happened was I had spoken to someone who was an MFT, and that sounded good to me. And I just picked that. It's funny too, because I don't do couples therapy. I don't do family therapy. I don't see kids. I went into it. I don't think I really knew what I was getting into, but I do really appreciate that I went to an MFT program because I have that very systemic point of view. So I like that. I'm glad. I don't regret it at all, even though I don't do any of that kind of work. I only see individual adults. Yeah, I like having the systemic approach and perspective.
Yeah, I think your story hits a lot of what I talk about with psychology as like an undergrad. Like, it's not well advertised that you can't do anything with it other than go to grad school. And so all us therapists in kind of this age range all got into it and looked around and like, oh, guess we'll go to grad school then.
Oh my gosh, I had this horrible job. My first job, I worked in a residential treatment facility with kids, and it was terrible. It was a lot of they're quote unquote severely emotionally disturbed teens and elementary school kids. I was in hands-on restraints almost every day. I mean, the pay was awful. So that was my experience of, oh, this is what you can do with a undergraduate psychology degree. Yeah.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Just a recipe for burnout, right?
It was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I think it's well known in the field. Like, I don't know if it looks bad for undergrad to advertise that you can't do anything with this, but I love couples therapy, so that's what I like doing. But the systemic work really appealed to me, just kind of that idea of like we're all part of these various ecosystems, and like looking at even working with an individual, because that's still a big part of my caseload, seeing all these individuals, but like still looking at it relationally. I think, I don't know, I'm biased, right? But like that just makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're not, none of us is an island, and most of the work that I do with people and the problems that we're addressing, it's all connected to how they're relating to other people a lot of the time. So, which is either just the way I approach things, or just is, right? Like you said, maybe I'm biased, but yeah, that's my training. So that's how I'm approaching things.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I'm guessing your experience is similar to mine when I explain kind of my view on that to clients. Like, it makes sense. I mean, nobody's ever been like, that's preposterous. Like,
Yeah,
people are almost
absolutely.
always in for interpersonal issues of some form or another. Like, it's all
Right.
relational.
Right. For the most part. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So then what was your experience kind of like in the field and starting to get kind of your legs under you? Like, were you trying to do the MFT thing for a while and realize that's not a good fit for me? Or kind of how'd you filter to like, these are the people I want to work with. This is what I do well.
Yeah, no, didn't really do a whole lot of family or marriage therapy
Okay.
in the beginning either.
Knew right away.
I've had a weird career trajectory. So my like traineeship thing I did at the end of grad school, I was a bereavement counselor. So I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
But then completely unrelated, right after grad school, I went into working with severely mentally ill folks. And so working with a lot of folks with schizophrenia, severe bipolar disorder, trying to keep people out of the hospital, basically.
Yeah.
That was the kind of work that I got into. And that was the population I worked with for years, actually, for a while. So, and actually enjoyed it in a lot of ways. And as over the years, and unfortunately, this is the way our system works in a lot of ways, right? The more experienced you get, the less acute the population you work with, right? Like the people who need the most help get the least experienced clinicians working with them. So I'm working in these county programs and county funded clinics and all of that, earning my hours, doing all that sort of thing. And as I'm getting more experience and getting licensed, and getting less and less acute, less and less severely ill people.
Right.
And so that's how it's kind of gone on. So I did that for a long time. Did a lot of intake work. So I have had, over the course of my career, I've had the pleasure of meeting a ton of people because I worked as an intake specialist for a long time.
Sure.
And then I worked for, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the places I've worked or who I've worked for. Is that like a thing?
Are they litigious where they're going to come after a small therapy focused podcast?
I don't know. I'm not going to say anything bad about any of it.
I'm not.
So I will just
speak freely.
Informationally, I worked for Kaiser Permanente for several years. And while I worked there, I ran intensive outpatient. So I met tons of clients doing that too.
Yeah.
So I've had this really cool opportunity to just meet tons and tons and tons of clients and people over almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
A really long time I've been working at. So, but a lot of general stuff, right? I went from doing this people with really severe mental illness, kind of bringing down the acuity, but still very general, because when you work in an environment like that managed care kind of clinic, you're just kind of seeing whoever they give you. You don't get to specialize. You just have to see all the people. And so eventually I left there and had an opportunity to finally start to decide, who do I want to see? How do I want to specialize? I have all this experience and all of this knowledge and all of this, I've met all of these people, and then I have all of my own experiences and all my own, stuff. And what do I want to do with all that? And and so I decided that I wanted to kind of narrow it down to working with some folks who've had some similar experiences to me, which is folks working with post-religious, I hesitate to use the term religious trauma, although I do sometimes use that, but I do not consider myself to be a trauma specialist. So kind of recovering from religious harm, or, recovering from religion in general.
Sure.
And then also kind of intersecting with the queer folks, LGBTQ population. So yeah, and that's my special area of focus now, which is pretty cool.
Which is how we connected. The religious trauma, recovering from religion niche on Instagram is still pretty interconnected and small. So
we're a small little gang on Instagram.
Yes. We're growing slowly. But yeah, I mean, I think lived experience is right. Like, so many people are leaving religion like in droves. Some of the worst church attendance in our country's history, and millennials and under tend to be more comfortably non-religious than affiliated with any sort of religious group. And so all these people leaving religion who have some form of harm, I'm pretty comfortable using the term trauma and working with that specifically. But it's one of those things where, there's all these people who are leaving church and have to do something with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such an impact. And I think for me too, I didn't really recognize that. I left so long ago. So I left church and all of that when I was in undergrad. My experience was I went to university, and that's when my world sort of opened up and was like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't all true.
Sure.
And we didn't have words like deconstruction, or we didn't call it any of that. It was just sort of like, oh, you're falling away. Like, yes, I guess I did. Well, that's that.
You terrible heathen, you.
Yep. Now I'm a heathen. I have to live with that. And I had been just sort of sitting with that for years and years, but I don't think I really understood all the ways that had impacted me. And I really it took me much, much longer to unpack and come to terms with my sexuality and my identity in that way. That was a much longer process. So the belief part was the easier part, to be like, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Jesus, I don't believe this stuff anymore. But the other stuff is so much more ingrained, right?
Yeah.
That's all the purity culture bullshit stuff. That's just like, ugh. It's just so deep in there.
I use deconstructed and deconverted differently, because I think deconstruction is like the doctrinal, like, I don't believe that stuff anymore. But the deconversion is the stuff that's almost like you soaked it up like a sponge. Like, it's in there deeply, and we don't always think of like needing to not believe it, because for many of us, we didn't choose to believe it at any point. It just is what was normal. So like growing up in purity culture, like, you just absorb a lot of messaging there, even if it's not explicitly said to you. And so it's actual like work to dig some of it out and be like, oh, hang on. Not only do I not believe this, but like, I actually have to replace it with something else.
Yep. Exactly.
Working with this group, kind of what have you seen? I think I talked about this recently with somebody else, like Trump and COVID kind of as like a double whammy of people leaving the church. But like for you left the church a while ago. Like, what has it been like kind of finding this niche, this group of religious trauma people, both clients and other professionals, like somebody who's been out of it for a long time? Has it been like, oh, all these people are leaving church, so they need help and I can relate, so I will help them? Or was it like reading something or seeing something that resonated with you, where like, oh, this is the work that I want to do?
It was, I was starting to see some of the clients just, they were popping up in my caseload, right? And I was, having I think already openly identifying as a queer identified therapist, you know, we tend to get queer clients, right? Because a
Right.
lot of times, you know, LGBTQ clients want to see a therapist who is also identified as such. And so within that, I would get a client here and there who also grew up in, you know, an evangelical family or a, you know, just a really super Catholic family or something. And so that would end up being part of the conversation. And I was realizing like, yeah, okay, this is a thing. This
Yeah.
is a thing that I totally relate to, and there is a need here. And so I really started digging into it. And I started digging into it online and really realizing how much was out there that
Yeah.
I didn't even realize. And it's interesting when you talk about, yes, within the last several years, how there's been this kind of exodus out of the church. How little has changed. What that sort of shocked me. You know, when
Sure.
people talk about evangelical culture or the jokes about different things, you know, we're on Instagram and I see the things people post about like youth pastors or just all of that. I'm like, I haven't been a part of a church since the 90s, and I still get 90% of the jokes. It's
Right.
crazy to me how little has changed. It is the same shit. And it's kind of horrifying and kind
Yeah.
of hilarious all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of progressive.
Right. I guess so, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you grow up in like a heavy evangelical? Like, is evangelicalism your background?
Yeah. Evangelical, American Baptist, Orange County, California. So not as conservative as some.
Correct.
I did not. I have a very close friend who grew up in small town Missouri, evangelical, and so we compare notes a lot. And so she had
Sure.
like kind of mom who would like throw out her tapes and CDs and stuff, and like I didn't have that level. But I was very, you know, I was in youth group. I was in the, you know, praise band singing. I went on mission trips. My senior summer, I went to Europe and spent the whole summer over there doing mission work in Eastern Europe because apparently they
Yep.
needed Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I was very much into all of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely hardcore. So that, yeah, that's my background. And um my parents are still very much Christians.
Sure.
So that's, you know, that's a thing.
Big. Yeah. I relate. Both my parents work at parochial schools still.
Oh wow.
So they very much just turned a blind eye to it and try not to deal with it.
Yeah.
My family's also evangelical, but we're the Midwest, like Midwest nice, so you don't deal
Uh-huh.
with, you don't confront things.
Where in the Midwest?
I'm from Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So like evangelical but German, so like it's very like subdued and stoic instead of
Yeah.
anything people think of as evangelical. Like we weren't standing up and singing in church. Like no.
Yeah.
That would be bad. I think you're the first person who's brought up mission trips. Let's talk about mission trips. Like,
Oh man.
what a bizarre! I went to Ukraine. I did a 3-week mission trip to Ukraine back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? Why were we all going to Eastern Europe?
I don't know.
Why was that happening?
Well, it was right. I don't know how old you are exactly or what year that was that you did
Sure.
that, but
I went in the early 2000s.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing I'm probably a little older than you. I went in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year I graduated high school. And so that was, I don't think I had a real concept of this at the time. But looking back, that's only 5 years after the Berlin Wall fell. So
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess that was part of the whole thing, was right. Like all this Eastern Bloc nations needed Jesus.
Had to go save the atheists over there from the
Yeah.
communist countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was gone for almost 3 months. I spent my whole summer. We
Wow.
camped. The 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 organization was called Royal Servants.
Okay.
And it wasn't my church, it was a larger organization that was a national organization. So
Mm-hmm.
we actually started the summer at a boot camp in central Illinois. And then, yeah, flew to Europe and went all over Europe. We bussed and we camped most of the summer in Europe.
Sure.
Yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
That sounds like so easy for like youth pastor abuse to happen. It's weird because you know, like now being deconstructed and everything, like I work with people who go on like the Jehovah Witness or the Mormon mission trips and talk with them about like, right, that's designed to keep you in your religion, not actually trying to convert anyone else. But I'm connecting some dots in real time about like, oh yeah, that's true of our little evangelical go to a third world country mission trips as well.
Yeah.
Like,
you know,
yeah,
that is such a good point. And I'm not sure I ever really thought of it that way, but it's, yeah, I mean, who spends their whole summer before they go away to college doing that? Right? I could have been doing a lot of other things, but I guess that kept me out of trouble. I mean, I wanted to go. It was not like anyone forced me to go. My mom didn't want me. My parents didn't want me to go. My mom was so sad. I wanted to leave all summer. She was terrified. I was only 17 years old. She was like, oh, but yeah, very interesting.
So weird to send like young people like that who have next to no life experience and like so colonizing as well. Like what a weird, I don't know. That's the thing that I've talked about a lot around evangelicalism. It's just like the disrespect of other cultures. Like, let us come save you is like a gross mentality.
And children doing it.
Right.
Right.
Just bizarre.
And it wasn't just like I was a senior, but this was all high school kids. So there were like 14-year-olds in this group I was with doing this too. And we're going to like town squares, putting on little shows, right? Like drama things or mime skits. I was in the singing group always because I'm a singer, so we would sing. And then at the end it would be like, okay, now's the opportunity to go witness to people or talk to them. And like most of the time none of them spoke English, but we're gonna, it doesn't matter because God will speak to them anyway, right? So we have we would have tracts maybe in their language, maybe not. But, if you got someone to stand there and pray with you, then more souls for God. It's like, okay.
Yuck. Yeah, no. And like, I remember I went to Ukraine and we had a translator, but like none of our stuff was in Ukrainian. It was all in English. And like, I spent like half the time coming up with like trying to make some version of a curriculum because what the people wanted and the kids all wanted was to learn English. So like we were there for like 3 weeks, about 2 weeks in like the village that I got sent to, and was just I didn't have any background in curriculum or education or language, and like, but trying to like, oh, they want to learn about like I'm supposed to teach them about Jesus, but they want to learn English, so I guess I can use that. And like, yeah, it's just wild. I got sick in Ukraine too, so I did the full 3 weeks, but I was down and out for part of it, which is terrifying as somebody who has no life experience to get like severely ill in a country that you don't speak their language.
Oh yeah. How old were you when you were there?
I was in college. I think it was the spring semester of my freshman year, so I was 18.
You're pretty young still. Yeah.
So I had I had the backup translator because we had one good translator went to like the VBS kind of thing that we were doing, and then the backup translator came to. I was staying at the pastor's house, and like came and was like, "We're taking you to the hospital," and I was like, "No,
No,
like, I'm
I'm not
not.
going to the
I'm not
hospital. Yeah,
doing that. No, I'll
that
stay
sounds
here and just be
terrifying.
sick." Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a good experience. But I also went for terrible reasons. I went because my girlfriend was going, and like I don't know, it's the good Christian thing to do.
Yeah.
My presumed future spouse, because that's how you date when
Uh-huh.
you're evangelical
Uh-huh.
Christians.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, of
just
course. Yeah.
a lot of terrible things about that. Terrible memories coming back all of a sudden. Things I haven't thought about in a long time. But like, right, just very. It wasn't about like go learn about another culture and like gain knowledge and appreciation for other people. It was go teach them how to be just like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Push the Jesus on them. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is not good. Like that's just colonization.
Yeah. We thought I definitely thought that it was like we had this thing that people desperately needed, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to bring it to them. And I think that is the thing that people who've never been in a fundamentalist religion or a, you know, yeah, that they don't get.
Right.
That like my wife grew up Catholic, but was never really super religious herself.
Sure.
And she when we talk about these things, she'd always be like, "Oh, that's so crazy or so extreme." Like she really doesn't get it because she sees religion as sort of this thing you do, like you go to church or you have your wedding at a church, or it's kind of
Right.
like a thing you perform, or you have these rituals that make you feel safe, or it's a cultural thing, not this deep seated, like infused every aspect of your life
Right.
thing. I'm like, you don't understand. Like when I was a teenager, it was like I thought these people were going to hell, and it was my job to literally save them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which
I think that's part of the reason why I'm drawn to doing this work, because like working with this niche, because there are just therapists who haven't been in that place and transitioned out, don't get that.
right.
They don't understand
Yeah.
it.
Well, there's a shared language to it all too, I think,
Yeah.
that like can save some time. But yeah, just being able to be like, oh, you were raised evangelical, me too. You went on a mission trip. Let's talk about that. Like
Yeah.
the longer I do the podcast, like talking to people who were raised Baptist or were raised you know, evangelical, but different branches of it, because there's so many different denominations that identify as evangelical. Like there's so much overlap. It's all the same stuff, just packaged up a little differently. But then certainly growing up like culturally Catholic, again, I'm in the Midwest, so it's a large group of Catholics settled here. Like, yeah, there are people who are Easter and Christmas kind of Christians, but like fundamentalism is the literal like word of God is the Bible, and therefore like you are responsible for everybody else's eternal well-being. Like it's such a heavy like literal hell awaits you if you don't do a good enough job. Like that's a messed up thing to tell a little kid.
Yeah. And a huge burden to put on
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So part of what got me into this is when I deconverted, it felt so lonely because my wife was ready. We were both raised evangelical Lutheran, but she had worked in schools connected to the church and was like, had enough bad experiences of misogyny and all the stuff that comes with being a female in an evangelical setting, where she was, I think, just waiting for me to be like, yo, I don't believe this anymore. But we kept kind of moving like more and more progressive, like, no, gay people are okay. We shouldn't like be bigots and like, but still trying to stay Christian, and finally just being like, I'm out. My wife was like, cool, me too. But I think for me, I was like, that's all of our friends. That's all the people that we play volleyball with. That's like all of our connections, because I
Yeah.
had worked at a Christian counseling place. She had worked at Christian schools. Like, it felt very alone. And for me, like, that was the big draw of doing the work and getting certified to do some of this work, was like, there's a bunch of resources and support out here. Just people who are growing up in a high control religion don't have access to any of it. Like, they're cut off on purpose from it. And so trying to help people with like that transition was really important to me, because it was only after I deconverted and was like an out and out atheist that I was like, oh, there's so many people out here who could have helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that community is growing. But again, like, when you're growing up in high control, you don't have access to the outside world.
Right. Right. Yeah. You don't, and you're told that whatever is out there is so scary and
Mm-hmm.
bad and evil and corrupt and all that stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Like, if there is some sort of community, it's not a real community. Or if there are people that are helpful and supportive, it's fake or it's pretend. It's just the devil waiting to get you. It's like,
Yeah, the devil, the world, are your own sinful flesh. Well, and like,
yeah.
it's so much of it is projection, because almost all I work with this all the time. People who are afraid of losing their support system, which happens very often, because those relationships aren't based on like something like unconditional love. Like, that's all conditional.
Yeah.
We'll be friends with you as long as you show up to church every Sunday. We'll be friends with you as long as you believe the same things that we believe, or, you know. So much of that stuff is conditional, and I think it's so hard for people to kind of like peek behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz analogy of like, oh, none of that was accurate. Like, and not only do I not believe the Bible, but like the things I thought about community or the things that I was told about relationships, like those aren't accurate either.
Yeah. That's so heartbreaking too.
Mm-hmm. And it's just right. Then the ground that you're walking on is all shifting underneath you, because it feels very lonely and scary.
It reminds me of when people are going through a breakup and they're like, was any of that real? Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Even though I might have been in it for 7 years, it's like, okay, but was any of that, did you ever love me? It's kind of like that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think the breaking up, I do a lot of couples counseling. So like I say often, like, breaking up is a process, not an event. And so like, there's all these things that linger with it, of like something like purity culture, realizing like, oh shit, like, I don't believe the Bible, but I'm still holding on to a bunch of this stuff. Like, that's an ongoing process then to start working through some of that and addressing some of that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Purity culture is like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
I'm still working through it, man.
Were you like a ring ceremony, purity ring?
Not a ceremony, but I did have a ring. Have a ring. Yeah. A ring.
Yeah.
A ring. This is funny. A ring that I lost. I left. Pretty sure I left it in a locker in PE at high school.
Uh-huh.
Oops. Well, lost my purity ring. Yeah.
And then I think working with the queer community, which, like, I'm going to overgeneralize a little bit here, but say it's probably always harmed by organized religion.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would say mostly.
Yeah, nearly always.
That is maybe changing. Certainly where I am, like, I'm in San Diego and I live in the sort of, or at least adjacent to the neighborhood in San Diego. And there are definitely a lot of not even just gay friendly, but like, I would say, like queer focused churches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they probably look very little like the churches we grew up in, but in some ways are very similar. I mean, I don't know. So maybe there's some version of organized religion that's happening that isn't harmful or is less harmful. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now. But that's now. I mean,
Yeah.
Would we say that 20 years ago?
No. Well, and I think
absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't know that those are all doing harm, but I think those are in reaction to people leaving the church, and so people trying to be like, well, we're gonna sweep up this community. We're gonna like have this niche area.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm skeptical that community can't be done elsewhere better than by church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So about 10 years ago, I joined a community chorus to sing. And it is the San Diego it's a lesbian chorus. It's the gay women's chorus, basically, but they're open to anybody, allies, whatever. And at the time, I was not fully out. I was married to my ex-husband.
Yeah.
But I had always been a singer. I was super into, that was like my main activity in high school. I had missed it. I just didn't have an outlet for that. You know, it was also strongly associated with church. And once you're out of school and stuff, it's like, what do you do with that? I didn't know what to do with that unless you were in a church. I didn't know, I'm not going to go join a church so I could sing in a choir.
Right.
So I'd been asking around, and someone pointed me in the direction of this chorus, which happened to be this like gay chorus. I was like, uh-oh, okay. So I joined the chorus, and it turned out to be very church-like, not in any sort of religious or spiritual way, but in the community way. It was weird to me how similar it felt in that way. We would have rehearsal. I'm still in it. We do have rehearsal. At the end of each rehearsal, we do a thing where we all stand around the room in a big circle and hold hands, and you go around the circle, and if people have concerns they want to share with the group, they share them. Like it's freaking prayer requests. But it's not. It's just sharing with the community so you can share. And like, I mean, it felt so churchy. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my God, this is community.
Right.
Completely free of religion. You don't need any of that. You just need a bunch of people to get together regularly and like give a shit about each other. That's basically what you need.
And that's one of the things I hear most from people is like missing the community. And it's like, right. But like, it's so, I don't know. That's how I think privileged religion is in our, at least in American culture of like, that's where you go for community. And it's like, well, community is not really based on that. It's based on, we like singing or like, you know, whatever it is. It's just finding the community around a thing you enjoy or with people you enjoy, as opposed to a belief system you're all supposed to share.
Where do you find community?
That's been a bit of an ongoing process. I identify as atheopagan, which is non-theistic paganism. So we're not like worshiping the moon or anything that I think people sometimes accurately stereotype about the pagan community. But that took off during COVID, which was when I was like, I was pretty deconstructed already. I was just uncomfortable with the term atheist. So it took me, but that was kind of like the jump and ripping the Band-Aid off. And so when COVID hit, that community moved fully online and really took off. And that I kind of was not like early. I feel like I was late to the takeoff, but I've joined the community and like, that's been really helpful for me. My other communities have been like always activity related. So like I play volleyball. So like I have my volleyball friends. I have my board game friends. I've had to like rebuild some of that. Like I have a D&D group of people who are not church people, which like is really great because I'm not a church person anymore. So like some of it was rebuilding and like the activities didn't change, just the people I did them with changed. But the atheopagan community has been nice for me. That's kind of like some of the like ritual and meaning making that church had is that. So like I didn't like church services. I'm not musically gifted. I was never in choir or anything. I liked some of the intellectual stimulation of it. But also I am ADHD. So like the church year, like the structure of like, here's Christmas and then Easter and then this and then this. So like being pagan has been helpful for following the wheel of the year. So it's all based off of the equinoxes. And so then like you have a harvest festival and you have, you know, Halloween's a thing. And like, so that provides some structure to my year, which has been helpful. And then, yeah,
Cool.
it's been interesting. I'm 35. So also not a lot, higher than I would have expected number of people also either deconstructed or are currently deconstructing. So some of it is like people who have been part of my community catching up to kind of where I'm at, because I'm out and about, openly atheist, and promote a lot of that stuff and talk about religious trauma. So some of the people have been like reaching out to me, and so then it's like, oh, that's nice. Like I don't have I don't have to scrap my entire community.
That's nice.
Yeah, but it's work, and I think that's scary for people in the work that we do, is like, what's their community going to look like without their church groups?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially after so many years of like, I think that's where one of the things that's been different for me, right, is I left so young, and I still have a lot of contact with people that I grew up with, and you know, my parents are still friends with all of the same people for 50 years. I've been friends with the same people. But you know, when you've been part of the same community for your entire life, and you're in your 30s or 40s, right? To walk away from that is terrifying. Absolutely. Well, you know,
And what a lot of my clients bring up is like, they'll say like, I know how people who left get treated, because they've seen it happen. People. Yeah. And so it's scary because they're pretty sure like that's what's going to happen.
Yep. They know. Absolutely.
Yeah. Can we talk about sexuality? I'm just going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, totally.
So like deconstructing purity culture a little bit, but like being married, being in a hetero relationship, and then kind of like identifying some things and questioning like, what was that process like for you? Like, I guess in relation to kind of deconstructing some old stuff around purity culture.
It was a very long process. Yeah, so I knew, I would say in high school, that I was attracted to women. Of course, immediately that was like, shove that down, right? That's not okay. We're not even going to think about that, talk about that. Nope. Bad. So, that's what I did with that. And I don't even remember a whole lot of discussion about, I mean, it was just sort of like being gay or being lesbian or any of that was just not even an option. It wasn't, I didn't really grow up in a church that was like, you know, God hates the gays or anything like that. It was just kind of like compulsive heterosexuality, right? It was just like, gay is not a thing.
Right.
So just don't even, So, the first, I had a boyfriend in college who was the first person I ever told that I was attracted to women. And I remember crying, telling him this, like, I was so ashamed of it. Like, I wish it was just not a thing for me. I wish it would go away. And as I got further into adulthood and had more and more space from the church and that life, and you know, I got more comfortable with it and saw myself as bisexual. I married my ex-husband. Was kind of like, okay, well, this is just sort of who I am, but I'm never gonna be out.
Sure.
Like, some people are gonna know this about me, but I can't possibly, I could never possibly disappoint my parents that way. I could never possibly be in the world and I was terrified of just being out. I don't know. It was, yeah. So it took a very long time, and it wasn't until my late 30s, mid to late 30s, that I really came to terms with realizing that I'm like primarily attracted to women.
Sure.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes now I'm still, because that took so long, it's like it hasn't even really been, my wife and I have been together 8.5 years, and like sometimes I'm still like, I can't believe I'm married to a woman.
Yeah.
It
Right.
blows my mind, because I grew up and still live for so long with this idea that that's just never going to be a possibility for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also another thing I think that makes me maybe a little bit unique, is I feel like I have this kind of both sides of the fence perspective, right? Like I lived like straight life for so long, and then kind of like straddled it for a little while, and then like now I'm, I've been living as a queer woman with my wife for almost a decade, and like it's just, I don't know, I have this sort of weird, unique path I've taken.
Yeah. Right. I like to, this isn't a one-to-one analogy, but the analogy I draw for people is like, how many planets are there? And most people will think 9, and then they like stop and are like, hang on though, like I know that's not the correct answer, but when we're taught certain things during our formative years, like it just imprints in our brain differently. And if you're raised in a high control religion, you're kind of, correctly using this word here, you're indoctrinated around certain things, and sexuality is one of them. Like hetero monogamous relationships are the norm in that worldview. And like if you're at an impressionable age and that's the message you keep getting over and over again, it's hard to kind of combat that, because it's just locked in a certain way because of when you learned it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when that's locked in, and you think, okay, so if I'm not super attracted to men, or maybe I am sometimes, because I don't consider myself like 100% gay. I have always kind of struggled with the terminology. I usually say queer.
Sure.
It's funny though, my wife, she's a little bit older than me, so she really doesn't like the word queer. She's like, that was always a bad word when I was young,
Right.
She's not like, she doesn't like hate on anybody for using it, but she's just like, I can't get behind it. I'm like, I understand that, but like that's what the kids say now, so it's okay, it's not a bad word anymore, babe. But I always land on that, because I'm like, I don't know, I don't want to be put in a box. Like, I mostly like women. Occasionally I'm attracted to dudes, but mostly not, and maybe I would be attracted to some non-binary people or trans people. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm getting a little parenthetical there, but if I was not really getting into, like if I'm having trouble in sexual relationship with my, with in a relationship with a man, like I always thought there's something wrong with me. Right? It was the question was never, is it that I'm just not into guys?
Right.
That's not a question that you ask when you are raised in that environment, right?
Right.
It's like, well, you're a woman, so it really doesn't fucking matter if you're not into sex.
Yeah, I just made
First
such a
of all,
pained face for that is purity culture messaging 101.
It doesn't matter, because you're not supposed to like sex, first of all, and you're just there to like, put out make him happy and also make babies, but mostly make him happy. And yeah, you're not really supposed to have a whole lot of sex drive anyway. You're not supposed to like sex. So
Right.
how was I supposed to know?
Right.
And the message I usually got was just kind of like, find a nice Christian guy who's, and then even after I left the church and maybe didn't care so much about the Christian part, it was just sort of, I don't know, it just completely, you don't know which way is up when you don't have any way to connect with your own sexuality.
Right.
No way to identify any of that because
Yeah.
you're just told it's not important.
Yeah, and it's one of those, I think, sneaky / insidious ways in which religion and purity culture especially is like cult model. That's information control, like not having frank discussions around like, here's what sexuality looks like and here are all the different ways it can present. Like only presenting one option to people limits what your brain is aware of. Like that's information control. That's how cults operate. But two, like, right, this is one of my soapboxes. I've had a couple sex educators on the podcast. Like obviously like comprehensive sex ed is just so important. Like purity culture harms people. Even when I was still a Christian, I worked at a Christian counseling place. I can't tell you how many couples come in because they're having sexual problems because they have no background on like what sex is supposed to be. It's like never ever talk about it, and then it's supposed to be this awesome wonderful thing when you get married, and like that's not at all how it works.
Right. Yeah.
You can't come into it with all this guilt and shame and expect this awesome experience all of a sudden.
Right. That makes no sense. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think it's it's just a huge topic around people who are raised in church and then figuring out they're queer later in life. Like I think for so many people it's similar. Like just they were never allowed to explore it and it was never an option. Which is harmful. It's just so harmful.
Yeah. I think as women too, I don't know if this is a thing for people socialized as boys and as men, but I know definitely socialized as girls in the church. I feel like you're not really supposed to want much of anything. Like
Sure.
Definitely sex, right? Definitely, like when it comes to dating, you're supposed to be chosen, not choosing, right?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be pursuing a dude. You're supposed to be, like be chosen.
Right.
I don't know. Just that there's a lot of existing and waiting for things to happen to you, not decide that, like a lack of agency, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So sex is one part of that. It also connects me, purity culture I think is so connected with all that stuff around body image and weight control and that stuff too, right? Like the messages maybe is getting better. I don't know if that's getting better inside the church yet. It's getting better in our culture overall. Yes. But certainly, around like you need to, control your weight and control how you look for your husband.
Right.
Right.
Like, but not you can't be too attractive, otherwise you're causing people to stumble. Like it's just
right.
There's no winning.
There's no, of course not. Yeah.
It's super, super messy, which is why we help people come out of it, right?
Yep.
What does self-care kind of look like for you at this point in your life now? Like working in the fields, you've been in the field for a long time. Like what do you kind of do to balance your mental health? How do you invest in yourself so that you can be helpful to clients?
Good question. I mentioned singing. So I had I've been on a little hiatus, but I'm getting back into it. So I'm going to be starting back fall season in the chorus. I also do little things here and there with my wife plays guitar. She sings too. We actually met in the chorus. But she also plays guitar, which I definitely do not. And so sometimes we work on little things together. Like we're going to do a song for a friend's wedding coming up. So that's cool. Things like
Nice.
that. I go to yoga sometimes. We do things. I take walks. I would say my most consistent thing is I try to go for a walk almost every day, just around my neighborhood. Just like just do something to move and get outside, right?
Yep.
Like it's a mental health thing. It's kind of a fitness thing, but more than anything, it is taking care of my brain,
Right.
my mental health. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, nice. San Diego's experienced some weird weather as of late. Southern California getting hit by
hurricane.
a hurricane and an earthquake. But yeah, I mean, like when you're in a nice environment where that's most of the year is supposed to be nice out.
Yeah, see, I do take it for granted. I'm telling you that, and like, it doesn't.
You don't have to put snowshoes on to go outside.
Doesn't even occur to me that most people can't do that. Yeah. Like, it is unusual that I wouldn't be able to just go for a walk outside most of the year. So that's what I do. Yeah, unless it's crazy hot or pouring rain or something, then yes, most of the time I get to do that. That is the big advantage of living here. Yeah. Sure. Another thing that I do that I find super helpful, and I sometimes I come in and out of doing this, but I start my day with a written notebook and like a one-page journal is not really the right word for it. I basically have like a small list of categories in my life that I kind of go down and to see, like, do I need to address any of these things today? And what am I going to do? And if I need to get some thoughts out, I might do that. But it's kind of like, okay, what do I need to do for my business? What do I need to do for my kid? What do I need to do for the house? What do I need to do for, like, do I need to check in with my parents about something? Do the dogs need anything? Like, I have a list. It's about maybe 15 things long. And I like doing that to center myself. I like doing it on paper because if I get on my phone, it's like game over. I'm going to be on Insta, I'm going to be checking my email, I'm going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
So I really like just taking the notebook, sit down, go through those things, decide what needs to get done that day. I don't know. It helps me keep my brain organized.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of my little self-care deals.
Yeah. Awesome. What are you reading? What are you watching? What's going on in your free time, your downtime?
What am I reading? What am I watching? I just started. Well, so reading, I tend to audiobook read because I have a hard time sitting still and just reading.
Sure.
I just started reading the latest book from Kristen Neff about self-compassion, fierce self-compassion. That's what it's called.
Yes. Shout out. I should try and get Kristen Neff on. She's awesome.
Yeah.
The self-compassion work is great.
Totally. Yeah. Love her. I'm huge on self-compassion. It's like a cornerstone of the work that I do with people. I'm always coming back to it. I think that lack of self-compassion is often the reason that people are having a tough time. Like, it just always seems to pop up. Yeah. Whether it's not being compassionate about yourself or not being compassionate about how your brain's working. You know, people getting upset with themselves for having negative thoughts in the first place. Like, okay, well, that's just how our brain works. You know, we got to make peace with that and learn how to work with it, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I started listening to her new book. That's what I'm reading right now. What am I watching? What am I watching right now? Well, we've been watching the Padres lose. That's what we've been watching.
Sure. I have a sports performance background, so like I have a special place in my heart for like the in-group out-group bias that plagues organized religion, political parties, all these other things. Like I let it exist in sports because I'm like, right,
Yeah.
like nah, I'm always going to root for my hometown team. Like that's I don't know, less harmless in my opinion, or more harmless in my opinion.
And I take special joy in knowing that my team is named after religious figures.
Sure. Yeah, we have the Milwaukee Brewers, so we're named after drinking
beer. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we're in any shows really. Oh, we started watching Foundation. Have you seen that?
I haven't. Based on the Isaac Asimov.
Yeah.
I'm a sci-fi nerd. I haven't watched the show. I've read the books.
You have. Good for you. Yeah. I like it so far. I'm only a few episodes in. But my wife fell asleep during the last one, so she has to watch it so that we can keep going. And she hasn't watched that one, so I'm waiting.
Yeah.
So we can keep going.
Being partnered and watching shows together also causes a stress on relationships.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, come on, you gotta go watch it so we can keep going. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
I always love to ask, because I think we as therapists are normal people and we like to watch things and read things. And also a lot of therapists, I ask what watching and reading, because almost every person I've had on the podcast is reading at least one like nerdy therapy topic related book. So sneaky way to sneak some resources in.
Yeah. No, my wife's usually bothering. She's like, you need to read a novel. I'm like, I know, but there's so many things to read that I want to read that I don't have time for a novel.
Right.
So
yeah, for sure. Well, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time and coming on today.
Thank you. It's been fun. It's been very fun. I appreciate it.
Podcasting's not so hard or scary. It's just,
not at all. It's been cool.
Yeah. Awesome. And to all our regular listeners, most of you are therapists. Thanks for tuning in once again. We'll be back with another. Oh, I was wrapping up already. Where can people find you? Where if people want to work with you or find out more about your work, follow you on social media? Where do they find you?
My website is it's just my name, so it's taramcgrath.com. And on social media, I am mostly on Instagram, and I'm at the agnostic therapist. That's my handle. Yeah. So,
which is how we connected. Yes. So definitely go give a follow. I love, just to nerd out for one more second, I love the religious trauma community on Instagram because we just share each other's posts around because everyone's like, oh, that's so good, I need to post that. So yes, go give a follow.
We all just follow each other and share all each other's stuff. Totally.
It's a nice little weird corner of the internet that we're all very loving and supportive, which is great. Well, yes. So we'll have those in the show notes so they're easy for people to find. All my stuff, as always, is at wellnesswithjared.com. Again, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everybody.